From the CISO series, it's Cybersecurity Headlines.
Pegasus spyware confirmed on journalist phones. Federal agencies are failing to protect sensitive data, according to a Senate report, and ransomware operators recruiting insiders to breach corporate networks. These are some of the stories that my colleagues and I have been bringing to you this week on Cybersecurity Headlines. And now we get a chance for some insight, opinion, and definitely some expertise on these stories and more from our guest, Sandy Dunn, CISO at Blue Cross of Idaho. Sandy, welcome to the show. Great to have you here.
Oh, hi, Rich. Great to be here.
All right. And full disclosure here, these are Sandy's opinions that we're going to be talking about on the show, not those of our employer. We also want to give a big shout out to our sponsor, Plextrack. We'll be hearing more from them later on in the show. And remember, you can join us on Crowdcast. We'll have a URL up in the corner if you want to be joining us on there to join in the conversation. We've got 20 minutes, so let's make the best of it. First up here, our first story of the day: remote print servers gives anyone with Windows admin privileges a remote print server gives anyone Windows admin privileges on a PC. So a researcher has created a remote print server that allows any Windows user with limited privileges to gain complete control over a device by installing a print driver. This follows a zero-day Windows print spooler vulnerability known as Print Nightmare. Microsoft released a security update for this new one, but researchers figured out ways to bypass the patch. This new method effectively allows anyone, including threat actors, to get administrative privileges simply by installing the remote print driver. Not exactly a surprising story, I hear. I guess you've been seeing a lot of these print driver stories here, Sandy. Is this a major worry, concern from your perspective?
Well, Rich, anytime if it's connected to the network, it's a viable attack vector for an attacker. So, and the fact that these IoT devices, and you think about it, printers were our first IoT devices connected to the network. The vulnerabilities in them have been around for a really long time. I just dug out an old book, a favorite, how to own a network, and that was written in 2003, 18 years ago. And in that story, it talks about a hacker actually using a printer to share files. So we've known about these devices. We've known that they are a liability on our network. Do a simple Google dork of printers in Google, and you find all of these exposed printers. I mean, it just is evidence of the problem that we know we should know better, but we're still seeing that people aren't locking down their systems and really patching them.
Yeah, there's all sorts of Sturm and Drang about, when are we going to, solve IoT in the enterprise or something like that from a security perspective. We've had printers for 40 years or more and still have an issue with them. So we will see if that goes here. An interesting twist on this, but definitely not a new security concern from a lot of people's perspective. Our next story up here, Iran leaks hints at second-tier targets as next terror gateway. Sky News has exposed a trove of documents appearing to be from a branch of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps intelligence group 13, catchy name. They show a coordinated attempt to collect information on the vulnerabilities of second-tier targets, including those that can capsize merchant vessels, remotely control electrical controllers in building management systems, and tamper with fuel pumps, triggering spills or explosion. Pretty nasty stuff. Experts say this may indicate a shift to target more easily exploitable sites. So, Sandy, my question to you is, what is to say about the vulnerability of soft targets? What can we do about this kind of stuff? Kind of a new threat service to be worried about for sure.
Well, I think, and it's a recurring theme in the stories that we're looking at this week is everyone's in scope for an attack. If it does any kind of communication that is over wireless or over a network, you're in scope to be attacked. So you need to have a team. You need to be looking at your attack surface and locking it down. I think the most interesting quote in the whole article was when he talked, using basic cybersecurity hygiene. The tools exist to prevent this. So use segmentation, password validation, two-factor authentication. What I think the story is saying is these attackers are looking for people who aren't doing their cyber hygiene.
Yeah, and kind of, coasting along on, this has never been a problem before. Why is it, an issue now? I always, when these kind of stories come up, I always think of a lot of the concerns around things like SCADA systems, that kind of stuff, where,
Oh yeah.
these are all connected systems that control a lot of important stuff, and we're still kind of grappling with the security implications on that. Definitely when there's state-sponsored activity around there, definitely a concern to be had for sure. In other state-sponsored news, we have Pegasus spyware confirmed on journalist phones. French intelligence investigators say Pegasus spyware has been found on the phones of 3 journalists, including a senior staff member at the country's international television station, France 24. This is significant because it's the first time an independent authority has corroborated the findings of Forbidden Stories, a Paris-based nonprofit media organization, and Amnesty International, who both had access to a list of numbers that were of interest to clients of the Israeli firm NSO Group, and then passed them on to subsequently to media partners. Getting that confirmation now, kind of a big deal here. This all started with the French president Macron stating that he was on that list, obviously taking more than a little exception to it. Not great, but does anything about this stand out as particularly troubling from your perspective, Sandy?
Again, any of these type of tools, Pegasus, Finfisher, any of these spyware tools, we're consistently seeing that we're being told that they're controlled, that they're only being used to prevent, cyber criminals, people who are doing drug trades, those kinds of things. And then the evidence is showing that that's not true, that these tools are being used to restrict people and to attack journalists and human rights violations. And I think that it's extremely troubling that we don't have a good mechanism in place to understand who's using these tools and why. And I don't have a great answer for it, but I definitely believe that it's evidence, at a national or at a global level, that we need to have some rules of engagement in place.
Yeah, and it really goes against prevailing kind of security wisdom at this point, where we've seen basically every major tech company coming out with bug bounties, like less obscurity, more transparency with these kind of things. Whereas groups like NSO Group or other organizations like that thrive when it comes to, hey, let's stockpile all of these. That's what APTs have been doing for years, obviously, but stockpiling this and kind of weaponizing them to sell as a commercial product, I think is definitely problematic at the scale that they can very easily reach. Whether NSO Group even knows it, there's been speculation that they've been investigating internally, and now are receiving pressure from Israel to further mount that up as to if and who is abusing their tools.
Absolutely, Rich. I mean, the quote that I thought was interesting from the one of the founders was that, he was quoted as saying, somebody has to do the dirty work. That doesn't sound like someone who's really being accountable and responsible for the tool that he's putting out into the world. He's justifying that, hey, yeah, somebody's got to clean up the garbage. So, I definitely raised concerns. And probably the most troubling thing about this whole story was the fact that one of the comptrollers reported that the NSO Group was not being ethical in selling their product over a year ago, and the Israeli government didn't start investigating until this story came out. So they're getting information. They're clearly not taking the abuse of this tool seriously. Also want to call out, some of these tools were used against Ron Farrow when he was doing an investigation against Harvey Weinstein. So if you have the money, you have access to these tools, and somebody has to be in the middle of making those ethical decisions. I mean, they're too dangerous.
Well, speaking of in the middle, someone's in the middle of military ship locations because there's been a report that people are spoofing them. According to researchers, since August 2020, over 100 warships from at least 14 European countries, as well as Russia and the US, have had locations faked using the Automatic Identification System, or AIS. These fake locations were often in disputed or into territorial waters of another country and lasted for up to days at a time. Part of the problem is that AIS is an unencrypted system, with some in the security community now calling for adding digital signatures to each AIS transmission. Full disclosure, this is the plot of a Bond movie.
Yeah.
Like this is not, this is entering into the realm of almost science fiction here. Definitely has the same kind of dangerous feeling, dystopian almost, that we've seen from deepfake kind of technology in terms of spoofing identity. Spoofing warships can be, certainly be equally as damaging, even more so. What should the military, NATO be doing to educate countries about this type of smokescreen, Sandy?
Attacking communication. I mean, it goes clear back to World War I. I mean, the threat isn't new. If you're out, if you're doing stuff, if you're sending a signal, somebody's listening, somebody's trying to get in the middle of it, capturing metadata. They may not even be trying to stop or trying to prevent you from communicating. But if it's out there and people can see it, they're using it. To your point, Mark Goodman wrote about the same type of attack in his book, Future Crimes. So I think what we're seeing in stories, this week and almost every week is, hey, it's time to do something about this internet and all of this communication, and what are we doing to protect each other and our citizens and all of our families and things that we care about.
All right, it's also time now to thank our sponsor, PlexTrack. We really appreciate their support of the show. PlexTrack is a powerful yet simple cybersecurity platform that centralizes all security assessments, pen test reports, audit findings, and vulnerabilities. PlexTrack transforms the risk management lifecycle, allowing security professionals to generate better reports faster, aggregate and visualize analytics, and collaborate on remediation in real time. Check out plextrack.com/CISO series to learn why PlexTrack is the perfect platform for CISOs. All right. Next story, near and dear to my heart, involves pneumatic tubes. We have to worry about them. They're a security surface now. Everything, cats and dogs lying together, et cetera, et cetera. A vulnerability called Pwned Piper is impacting the translogic pneumatic tube system, currently used in over 3,000 hospitals to move things like lab samples and medicine. An attacker on a hospital's internal network could effectively use the vulnerabilities to take over the entire tube network. Translogic says a software update for all but one of the vulnerabilities has been developed, with the mitigation technique available for the unpatched vulnerability. It was a little dubious in the reporting if they had actually started rolling out the patch or if it had just been developed. I believe it is now being rolled out. This definitely seems, though, to be a gap here in terms of like exploit and patch. We've certainly seen this with Microsoft Exchange vulnerabilities. I mean, the list goes on and on and on about patch all the things. There are reasons sometimes we can't patch all the things. Given your line of work, though, Sandy, even with comments, just kind of for your own personal opinion, how can we help hospitals handle this, and can hospitals handle this?
Yeah, Rich, when I saw this story, my heart went out to every cybersecurity team that's working in a hospital. They have such a difficult task. I've had the opportunity to meet with many of them. They typically have less people. They have a bigger attack surface. They have the most unique devices. It just raises visibility to just how difficult it is to secure a hospital environment. There's so much stuff that is vitally important. I'm sure somebody at the end of that pneumatic tube absolutely needs that information quickly, and how challenging it is to keep all of that stuff protected.
Yeah, and it's one of those things where there's like a disconnect because it seems like it's the most analog way to it seems like it's so physical, like so steampunky almost, to use pneumatic tubes. Like you don't think your bank pneumatic tube can get hacked, but any system with a controller. I mean, it almost goes back to the IoT example. We've certainly seen hospitals have issues with things like connected heart monitors. We've seen pacemakers, kind of be attack surfaces here. I almost think it's going to be like Battlestar Galactica after a while, where we're gonna say like we can hit these certain efficiencies if we network all the things, but the threat to the Cylon cyber attackers, we need to keep all these systems disconnected. For that, it would be a shame if we can't do that, because there are like real health benefits to doing so, and that's obviously the continual challenge, and why it's not so easy as saying like a typical convenience versus security kind of mindset, I think.
Absolutely. And, I'll say it again, the cybersecurity teams that walk into their hospital CEO and ask for budget, they're competing with all of the people asking for a new system or a new machine that, they have data that shows that saves human lives. It does something that, tangibly can improve humans' lives. And so, coming in as a cybersecurity professional, asking for a lot of money for potential issues it's a really difficult conversation.
Next up here, federal agencies are failing to protect sensitive data, according to a new Senate report. Of 8 federal agencies audited for their cybersecurity programs, only the Department of Homeland Security showed improvements in 2020, according to a report from the Senate Homeland Security and Governmental Affairs Committee, released by the panel earlier this week. The report underscores the increased scrutiny of federal cybersecurity by lawmakers in the aftermath of the SolarWinds supply chain attack. It found that 7 of the 8 agencies reviewed still use legacy systems that no longer have security updates supported by their vendor, which can leave agencies vulnerable to foreign hacking, the report notes. The Biden administration has kind of been open about trying to tighten up security, or at least making a lot of noise about it publicly. Doesn't exactly get good grades, though, from this report initially. Sandy, just curious for your overall thoughts on, obviously what's going to be an ongoing story.
Well, it's, obviously is extremely disturbing. I mean, it showed a lot of issues that they had been identified, but the positive is they're looking. They're actually going out and doing due diligence and trying to determine whether or not people are making the grade and are implementing the right security controls in the right places and following their own published standards. My hope is out of this report, it really does drive action. It drives priorities. I can almost guarantee at the end of this report, whoever was part of that audit, there was a cybersecurity professional saying, I've been screaming about this for years. I couldn't get anyone to pay attention and care about this. And it's thankful that they were audited and now it has visibility. So I think it's positive. I think it's a step in the right direction, and I look forward to, seeing improvements. I mean, my data's in there. I want to make sure they protect it.
Yeah, definitely. Next up here, spear phishing attackers increasingly targeting C-suite employees. According to a report from Barracuda, an average organization is targeted by over 700 social engineering attacks each year, and 77% of BEC attacks target employees outside of financial and executive roles, including personnel working in sales, project management, human resources, and administration. This is definitely different from regular spam. These C-suite, easy for me to say, spear phishing attacks show that middle and lower levels of organizations are now becoming easier targets, just easier to get to, probably with more access than ever. Is this a victory for cybersecurity in that hackers are being forced to go elsewhere from the top level, or simply an expansion of a winning model for cyber attackers?
Oh, wow, that's a difficult question to answer. I think you're asking who's winning. I'm not sure.
or is this kind of the proof that we constantly need to reevaluate, like, the value of an employee from like a cyber attack perspective, in terms of, like, it used to be, okay, the CEO, the CFO, these people have all the information, all the access. We need to put a giant fence around them. And is it now that, hey, we need to, we need to kind of anticipate that these lower levels may get breached and kind of, segment those as well, and not just kind of have an all or nothing for the C-suite kind of approach?
I'll go bigger. I run all sorts of reports. I look at who's the most targeted. I try to understand why, but it may be time to have 2 email addresses for every employee. One that you share out when you sign up for a conference, and one that you share externally, one you share internally, so that we reduce our attack surface and control it that way. I mean, I think we're at a point where just doing the same thing isn't really working. I mean, it is a loop of insanity. If I want to go look at a phishing report published by a major vendor, they typically ask for my email address, my phone number, to send me more email. I mean, we're in this insane loop of using these email addresses. So I think there's a lot of, it's interesting that, it clearly shows we've taught our CFOs and our CEOs to be really cautious, and we need to expand that conversation. But I also think it's a flag that, hey, maybe the email thing, maybe this isn't working well, and we have to rethink how we do it.
All right, and our final story of the day, ransomware operators are recruiting insiders to breach corporate networks. Lockbit 2.0 ransomware operators are actively recruiting insiders to breach networks. This effectively cuts out the middleman for many ransomware as a service schemes, which typically use affiliates to breach networks for a share of the ransom. Bleeping Computer believes these messages are targeted at external IT consultants who work for multiple clients, presumably not for long if they're working with ransomware operators, hopefully. A lot of insider threat has kind of been a big buzzword in the security community as of late, trying to develop better tools to kind of deal with that threat. Is this surprising to you, Sandy, to see ransomware being this blatant? I guess that was what was surprising to me. They were replacing wallpapers with like advertising recruitments.
Yeah, I think we can always look to the attacker community for their creativity. I mean, their business model keeps, impressing the rest of us with how, how the agile and willing to look for new ways to run their business. But it definitely, insider threat. I mean, Snowden. We can come up with all sorts of examples. It's a CISO's worst nightmare. Trust. But when you think about it, who should I trust is a human problem. I mean, that's been a problem ever since, Caesar got stabbed. I mean, trust is a really complex thing to understand because, to do anything, we have to trust, and trying to figure out, Philby, when he was part of GCH, I think was the right spy agency in Britain. He was such a destructive force within the British spy agency, and here he had so much trust. So yeah, it's a complex problem. Does it? Yes, everything worries me. I guess that's the short answer. Everything worries me.
The truest CISO response we can ever receive here, Sandy. Thank you so much. Before we get you out of here, though, what was one story that kind of stood out for you today? Maybe either good or bad, thumbs up, thumbs down, give an eye roll. What was it for you, Sandy?
For me, it was the Pegasus story. I really think that story raises the visibility to people selling software that potentially can cause far-reaching damage to our societies. And I really want to recognize the work by the Pegasus team that investigated that, and also Citizens Lab and EFF. Citizens Labs and EFF over the last couple decades have been so dedicated to making sure that our privacy in our rights on a global level have been protected. And really, I donate to them. I encourage everyone to. They do great work.
Well, thank you so much, Sandy Dunn, for being on the show. Sandy Dunn, the CISO Blue Cross of Idaho. Thank you again. We'll have to have you on real soon. And also, thank you to our sponsor, PlexTrack, for supporting the show. Remember, Cybersecurity Headlines is available every day. If you got about 6 minutes, you can stay up to date on all the latest. And you can come back next week. We've got all sorts of great live video coming up next Friday. Our video chat, Hacking Cloud Infrastructure, starts at 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern. This coming up Friday, a week from today, followed by speed dating, and then we'll be back with yet another edition of the Week in Review Friday at 12:30 p.m. 12:30 p.m. Pacific, 3:30 Eastern. Until then, I'm Rich Straffolino. Have a super sparkly day.
Cybersecurity headlines are available every weekday. Head to CISOseries.com for the full stories behind the headlines.